Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being part of the Communications Masterclass today. We're glad that you're listening for the replay. Today, we are going to be talking about communication for the year 2030 and how we need to future-proof our communications. So I'm going to start by telling you a story. So you have had a very busy day, and you finally get to sit at your desk at 5 o'clock. So you open your computer and you open the 117 emails that the average American receives, and you scan each of them in 60 seconds or less, just like the average American does. And then you take a look at your schedule and you see that you have a Zoom meeting in 2 hours. And most of your meetings are Zoom meetings because so many people, whether they work for another company and work hybrid, or whether they're entrepreneurs and they work by themselves, or in their own facility, the world is online. So it's yet another Zoom meeting. So you decide that you're going to take a quick nap before your 7 o'clock. So you lie down, you drift to sleep, and you wake up almost immediately and realize that it's time for your meeting. So you jump on your meeting and you see in the corner of your computer that it says it is April 15th, 2030. Somehow you have managed to move yourself ahead 4 years, and after you have the normal, what the heck, you jump on your call because you don't want to be late. Well, most of the people on the phone call have what looks like Apple earbuds in, and everyone on the call has them, and you think that's a little unusual. So you make a joke about it that, gosh, all of you have them today. And one of the guys looks at you and he's kind of snarky and he says, "Well, how do you talk without your AI in your ear?" So you determine that what's happening is that they have their chat in this earbud, and the chat is listening to conversations and it is telling them what to say. So they're not thinking much anymore. AI is telling them every word to say as well as what they write. Then two new people come on the line, a man and a woman. Now, fortunately, neither one of those have the earbuds in. So you're thinking at least maybe they're normal. You start the meeting and you ask the first gentleman that does not have an earbud in a question about the topic. And he starts stumbling and sort of hems and haws and says, "Well, you know, what I think about that is, yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. That's what it is. It's a good thing. Yeah, I'm sure of it." So he's just told you nothing. And then the woman who jumped on without the earbud gets online and she very articulately, very concisely answers your question. She uses a point. She explains what she means. She gives an example. She stops talking. Everybody in the room knows exactly what she's talking about because she landed on it right away. Now, fortunately, you then really wake up and realize that it is still 2026 and you're freaked out about the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What does the future look like? Now, I don't know that there are going to be Apple earbuds with AIs in them, but I do know, good morning, Miss Dee Dee, but I do know that AI is going to have more of an impact on our futures. In the last year or so, that AI has been more prevalent in the average person's life. The current statistic globally is that 54% of people have used AI, but only currently 14% of them use AI daily at work. And I can assure you that as the years pass, that 14% is going to increase greatly as to the number of people who are using AI daily at work. I think that's best illuminated by an article I read yesterday that Google is going to be, they called it upskilling 40,000 new manufacturing jobs so that those employees are savvy with AI. So that's 40,000 people across the United States that are
Yeah.
looking at getting improved expertise in AI because it's going to work in their manufacturing job. Today it is already chaotic. There is so much noise out there, so much disinformation. You're getting slammed with, as I said, the current statistic is 117 average emails a day in America. And most of those are spam because another statistic said that mass emails that go to 20 or more people, they have increased 7% each year for the last 5 years. So most of what is in your inbox is crap, but you still have to look at it just to make sure that it's a scan, but still you have to take a look at it. So there is so much noise out there that being a good communicator makes a huge difference. And that's only going to become more and more important as the world gets busier and more hectic. Vicki, you had a great article today where you were talking about jobs being compressed, not, because one person in AI can do something that several other people did. So jobs are going to be at a premium, and you need to be able to be one of those people who gets to stay and who still gets to be promoted and get other opportunities that help your career, whether they're at work or outside of work. This mass of misinformation and disinformation is so huge that last year, the Organization for Global Risk Management said that the greatest risk of anything in 2027 is misinformation and disinformation. So that is the number one globally, the greatest risk. And you think about all of the other risks that we have that seem so much more pressing, but that's the biggest thing in their estimation. And of course, there's the advent of AI and the way that people use AI to communicate almost exclusively. And Vicki and I were talking before the rest of you popped on that it is so critical to edit whatever AI output you get, whether it's an article or an email or talking points or whatever you're going to use. Very important. So as you look at the skills that you are going to need to be learning in preparation for 2030, you need to be looking at really understanding AI, becoming savvy at AI, because AI is not going away. So you need to make sure that you're good at it. You need to make sure that you are excellent at the prompts, that you know exactly how to do it. You don't just blather something. And that's one of the huge blessings that we've had with our lifeboat business in receiving the prompts that Vicki has given us. Because from what I entered before and after she gave us the information, the quality of my output is so much better. The results that I get are so much more thorough. So understanding the prompts are really important. Editing what you get. Yes, Vicki.
I wanna say when it comes to communication, I just wanna add this. You're gonna see a lot of people that are touting new, search and new AI. Like, right now, Claude is all the rage. Claude, 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 and I have not jumped on the Claude wagon. I've stayed with the GPT because, it's kinda like when you're an author, back when they made computers that were, designed for specific tasks, like a PC personal computer was made for publishing, and the Mac was originally made for graphic design. And Claude is graphic design, everybody's running to it so they can be really cool. But chat is, I'm like, get good at one thing, but don't run around and try to get good at them all. Just get good
Exactly.
at one thing.
Yes, absolutely. Dee Dee?
One of the changes that they made in Claude that made it so much more applicable now is that they took OpenAI's idea and actually made Claude more of a LLM, as well as, and let me finish. The main thing is that presently ChatGPT doesn't actually create files within your computer, whereas the new version of Claude can access your system and put in a file, and it's their new download capabilities. But the problem in that is it ups your security needs. It makes your system vulnerable to attack. So I agree with Vicky. I stay with OpenAI.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't realize that. And while the download capability is impressive because I do a lot of copy and paste into Word, and that's where I do my editing, um, it it would be nice to download. The vulnerability there scares the bejeebers out of me that people could access everything.
Yeah.
That's too much. Vic, do you have
Uh,
Well, yeah, I just think over time oh, I'm sorry. Monique, did you wanna say something? You say it.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Yeah, I was reading an article and it was saying that they made it seem like Claude was the go-to next, only because Claude didn't have as much information and data as ChatGPT because everyone was going to ChatGPT and asking it questions. So it was learning faster and building out, and it was moving at such a exponential rate that Claude was getting left behind. So it's almost like marketing. Oh, Claude is way better than chat, so that Claude could get more people to give it more information and more users to test out the different rollouts. And
Mhm.
I haven't, the government this and the government that. And the reason why influencers aren't using chat anymore is because now the government owns ChatGPT, and Claude didn't want to give the government access, so now everybody was going over there and pivot marketing. you know, go with what works for
Exactly.
you. Like Vicky said, get good at one thing before you leave and go to another thing, because they'll just have you jumping all over the place. Next thing you know, now Claude is with the government, and you got to try something different.
You
Exactly.
know, I agree with that. I wanna say don't use more than one engine because if there's any government interplay, you can manage all your stuff in one play. You don't wanna have to think about what you put here, what you put here, what you put here, what you put here. But what we're talking about isn't AI, it's communication. And the thing that I think Karen expressed that I think is super wicked important is that the communication tools, what we're learning is how to think differently. The whole planet, we have to think differently. We have to ask differently. And how you ask is going to help somebody think differently, receive the message, and be able to interact with the AI in a way where it's not taking you over, but helps you express more clearly what it is that we want to do. And to me, ChatGPT is made for those kind of people. ChatGPT is made for communicators,
Mhm.
whether it's writing or talking or whatever.
I agree with you on that. I've been very happy with ChatGPT and the research that I've done since then on other things. Definitely a difference in
Hmm.
GPT versus some of the others. So yes, Dee Dee.
That file transfer is the only place where Chat GPT had problems. If I've asked it to create a FDP for me to download, it changes the content. And it doesn't give me exactly what's there. So I have noticed that there are a lot of hitches. You have to watch if you ask it to make you a PDF to download onto your system, that it gets exactly the right system. So you need to check it because it seems to like to change things at that last minute, thinking, oh, yeah, this is more professional. And I don't
You
know if
mean you mean
it's the guys,
formatting or content?
it's the content. It
I've
changes the
not
content.
experienced that.
I
Claude or GPT?
what?
Who changes the content? Is it Claude or GPT?
No, it's GPT. When you ask it, if you just copy it and paste it into Word, which is what I do to edit a lot of my writings and so on after I contrast it, when I go to it and say, yes, that's perfect the way this is edited, please make me a PDF to download to my files.
I see.
And it
I'm with
makes, and then I go in to the PDF and it's not the same.
you.
I have experienced the same thing when I have tried to get a worksheet. It has given me a worksheet just in the regular printout, and then I've asked them to turn it into a PDF, and it's different information. It's not bad information. It's not the same thing that I looked at and approved. But back to communication. So in this new world, you need to be AI savvy. You need to be good at the prompts, but you also need to edit it so that it sounds like you as opposed to a machine. And you need to make sure that it's giving you the level of ethics that you want it to have. But more importantly, you don't want it in your ear when you're talking. You need to maintain your communication skills because communication skills are like a muscle. If you don't practice them every day, then you lose them. You lose the polish that you have on them. And in a world that is becoming so full of misinformation and disinformation and noise and hectic schedules, you need to have someone who can speak clearly. Because in that story I told you, the woman at the end who didn't have that earbud in, she was articulate. She said what she said and it landed because she remained a good communicator. Yes, Vicki.
In that example with that woman that you were just talking about, this is what I want to know because, they have the earbuds in and they're talking, and AI can tell them what to reply. They don't even have to think for themselves. And so the expertise that woman had, she put the earbud down and she was able to articulate, uh, give conclusions, talk in a way that showed her expertise versus her reliance. And I'm like, is that what we're going to be looking at in the future? Is that the thing where you're going to be in the room and you're either going to know your expertise and be really good at what you do and be present in the room and then be reliant on a thing talking to you? Is that what's the future is kind of?
I don't know. I made up the earbud with AI in your ear. So, but it would not surprise me. It seems within the realm of possibility.
It's coming, I agree.
The challenge that that people will have is that conversation is thinking on your feet. Whether you're on a
Mm.
stage or you're one on one, that's really what you're doing. You are thinking in real time and it's coming out of your mouth in real time. If you become reliant on chat to give you bullet points for when you're speaking, or God forbid a time when it's in your ear and it's talking for you, because that's the last important thing with AI, in addition to the becoming savvy and knowing the prompts and editing, is humanizing the information that comes out of it. Because I was telling Vicky when we started, I'm proud of the articles that I've written for Substack, and I've done almost all of them with the help of my chat, and then I've gone in and I have edited them. As I was reviewing the Substack articles that I was really impressed by and the people that I'm following, they're in first person. And so I've been going back and I have been changing all of the articles that I've scheduled into first person and re-editing them. I have seen an uptick in my viewership since I started doing that about a week ago. So I've humanized it even more than I had before. So that's another important part of using AI. But knowing that we need to continue to be human and present, and because we're thinking on our feet, be able to process that quickly with reasoning, be able to responding, as opposed to the one gentleman that I mentioned in my story who didn't have the AI bud in his ear. And he was sort of like, well, I think that, well, yeah, it's good. Yeah, that's it. It's good. That means nothing. So you need to be able to articulate those things. Now, one of the pieces of information I found as I was preparing for this class is that Gallup had some research, and that research is that in 2026, employees in the United States are exchanging information at 20%, not dropped 20%. It is at 20% of what it used to be. So employee engagement has really dropped. So not only are you communicating against people who are working with AI, who are busy, who are swamped, who have too many projects on their plate, but they're not listening as well. They are putting less energy into their conversations with you, and they're putting less energy into their work. So if you're working together and you're sharing information, it can make a huge difference. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to talk longer. That emphasizes the importance of being even more efficient and clear in what you're saying. So you want to make sure, and I've talked about this before, but concise speaking is huge. Yes, Vicki.
I thought what you just said was really important because it seems to me like with AI that they want higher productivity. And I think the employees, the reason it's down is because there's no connectivity, like human connectivity, which is something that we absolutely need. And I think what you're saying, I just want to ask, when we're looking at communication, because it seems like they're trying to move everybody away from human connection, and here's the AI, when workers really need interaction and human creativity. And I'm wondering if you feel like, um, if you feel like this is a culture management issue because part of it is a management's lack of communication or connection tools. And I realize when you were talking, one, do you think it's going to be asking questions of AI is different than asking questions of a team of people? And then do you think, or what's your opinion about this productivity just being, does productivity have to be faster than normal because of AI or not? And I'm not looking at AI. I don't want to talk about AI. I want to talk about the communication piece
Mhm.
between AI and people because it's like learning two different languages.
Yeah. Dee Dee, I'll get to you as soon as I answer that question. First of all, I agree with you completely that management is a huge part of the problem. They are
Mhm.
not connecting because they have their own pressures and their own schedules and their own deadlines. And so they are becoming less communicative. They're becoming more of the approach of, well, if they need me, they'll come to me. And and that's fine, but sometimes I'm too busy to come to you, so I need to make a decision. Sometimes I'm working at 8 o'clock at night and you've already gone home, and I need to make a decision. I do believe that we communication you're talking about. How many times have you been meeting with a group of people and somebody shares an idea and then you start talking about it? And ultimately, that one idea, which was good, is now a great idea because you've added to it. The team has done that. And when you're reliant on AI, yes, you can prompt it and say, I don't like that. Dig deeper. Dig deeper is not the answer. Having human creativity and human experience is is where the difference comes from. And all of that is communication. So I'm not saying AI is bad. I'm saying that what you need to have is the ability to work with AI without letting it flatten your own communication skills. Does that make sense? Good. Dee Dee, what did you have to say?
In this conversation, I think we're missing how, um, it sounds redundant, jobs are changing, but it's really, we're going from a physical or technical application to becoming the innovative application. So, the whole structure of corporations are changing to where AI and all its aspects are communicating with the CEO. And then he makes his decisions of the direction he wants it to go into, and then sends it to these team members. The team members are monitoring AI and clarifying and checking AI. They really don't have a way to input. And jobs are going to be changing where they're going to be looking for people's ability to create more value or worth to productivity,
Mhm.
not about teamwork or anything else.
I agree with you, and that's unfortunate because ultimately, I believe the best success is the marriage of those two. You still need human contact. You still need teamwork and human interaction because if not, then we might as well let robots run the company. Because I'm sorry, Dee Dee.
Vicky's muted and she keeps trying to talk, so I was trying to tell
I
her.
said that's exactly what they're doing. I was agreeing with what Karen was saying. I
Yes.
nodded.
So it's important that we do our part to stay human and remain the continue to have the ability to be transparent and present and credible and clear in our communications, because without that, we've lost. As a human species, we have lost the game. So what we need to do is focus even more on improving our communication. Now, one thing that is very important in this continuingly busy society that we live in is to be concise in what you're saying. If you are an over explainer, that's a problem because people shut you down. And as the world gets busier, they shut you down faster. So you need to be concise in what you're sharing. You need to be transparent immediately and stay present in your conversation because people need to be able to trust you. And right now, trust is hugely lacking with all of the misinformation and disinformation between human beings and the media. Vicki.
Could you say more about what you mean by being transparent immediately? Could you say a little bit more of what that means?
Sure. Hello, Nisha's pretty face. Yes, absolutely, I will. Part of that is the concise thinking, because if you start adding all this flowery language or you're trying to sound smart, have you ever met somebody who tries to sound really smart and higher than who they are? You've seen it in some of my posts. Simple is smart. People don't want you to be pretending you're something you're not. They want you to get to the point, because if you get to the point, that tells them that you know what you're talking about. And that's a level of transparency. If you're not, shooting all kinds of bull.
It's like mansplaining. It's
Yes.
not mansplaining. It's so I get it from the point of, "Let me tell you how brilliant and smart I am, and let me educate you, and let me show you how you're" all that has to go away, and transparency is also the lack of, bravado
Yes.
bravado in the conversation. That's what you mean by transparency. I am with you, my friend.
Yes.
I get you.
You need to be able to frame what you're talking about fast. And that goes back to something that you've all heard me say before. Lead strong, lead with your point, don't build up to it. So you want a strong start. You want to explain in 2 or 3 sentences, not 2 or 3 paragraphs. You want to give an example to make sure that they're clear, and then you want to be quiet, because that's really all you need in a business conversation. Now, this is different if we're sitting around over a cup of coffee. We still don't want to be wasting someone's time. But when we're having business conversations with people, it is important. You have an hour for a meeting. They're paying you for an hour of your time, and you need to be able to use decision-oriented language. You want to get to the point. You need to end the conversation by saying, "So let's summarize who's doing what," so that when they leave the conversation, they are crystal clear as to what is supposed to happen and who's doing what. That decision-oriented conversation or language really makes a difference in the coming years, because people are only half listening. They've got their own stuff. You've got your own stuff, so you're talking too fast. You need to be concise and end with decisions. Vic.
This is so beautiful because I think it's generational too. It's
Mhm.
face it, Xers and boomers, we're slow and we love to pontificate and we love to over explain and we have a lot of bravado because we're trying to show our superiors that we're the best person for the next level. Move me up, give me that promotion. And
Mhm.
nowadays we have remote working, and we have a younger generation that speaks faster, talks faster, and they don't want the bravado or the mansplaining or anything else. And it's like, get to the damn point. And that
Exactly.
to me is so interesting because it is a complete flip the script that you're talking about, if I get you right. Is that true?
Absolutely, and I was actually going to talk about that a little later, but I'm going to jump in and talk about it now. The difference between us, the boomers, the millennials, versus Gen Z, Generation Alpha, they grew up with text messaging. They I wrote an article, and I thought I described it really well because it happened to me, which is why it went really well. My daughter came in, and she's got her earbud because she's listening to music, and she's playing a game on her phone. And she walked into the kitchen, and I said, "Hello?" And she jumped like she was startled because she's so engrossed in this. Having to have a real conversation was challenging. She is currently in Florida with my dad. She flew down on Sunday by herself on a plane for the first time. Well, she did well. She ended up in Florida, not Spain, so yay her. But I asked her specifically, call me when you get on the plane, call me when you land, and call me when you get in grandpa's car. I got no call when she got on the plane. And when she landed and when she got in grandpa's car, I got a text because that's what her generation does. They text. If I can say it in 5 words, why should I call you, mom? Um, because I want to hear your voice, because I want to say I love you other than typing I love you. So you're absolutely right. Generations are huge. And as those kids are getting older, we're competing with them on their communication skill level. So I am not suggesting that we become them who do not know how to communicate. I am suggesting that they learn how to communicate and that we learn how to communicate better, faster, more concisely, more decision based. We need to watch our body language in these days, and we're going to need to be very careful as things go on in the coming years. First of all, because we're busy and somebody calls you when you're in the middle of something. Well, yes, yes, we'll talk. Well, you can hear my tone on that. We'll talk. That's not warm. And if I am doing other things while we're talking, if I'm uh, thinking about something else, so I'm not really looking at you, you can see on my face that I've zoned. So we need to be really aware of our body language as everything becomes faster so that we can focus on communicating properly. It also means that we need to watch our tone for that very same reason. And we need to be with people in their tone and body language. If we see a tone and a body language that does not feel good, you need to be able to say, does that make sense, to bring them back? And if they look angry or disgruntled, you need to deal with that because it probably has nothing to do with you. Um, and Vic, I'm going to finish one quick thought and then I'll come to you. I posted something on my school today that misunderstandings are usually communication issues. It's not that we're that we have something to fight about. It's that I was short with you because I had other things on my mind, because I didn't clearly communicate something to you. And so you misunderstood what I said because I didn't give you clarity. Therefore, that becomes a problem. So it's going to be even more so in the future as we're dealing with more noise, more expectations, and dealing with a younger generation that communicates differently from how we do. Vicky.
Um, think for the very first time, because of this conversation, I've actually seen the communication gap that you've been seeing for years and trying to help us communicate differently. And one of the things I noticed that you just brought up that I'd like you to say more about is how do we become, it's like, um, in order to communicate well, you pointed that we kind of, I'm using my own words, have to stop judging. I communicate better than you do. I communicate better than you do. And just go to, I communicate differently because you were using your daughter as the example and she just texted. And that to her is saying to you, she is fulfilling the agreement. Where
Mhm,
for you, it's like you didn't call, you could, and I realize that gap right there in how they do this and this um, can be huge. And I'm wondering, for me, I think that I have a responsibility as the older person to
mhm,
understand the younger person and not vice versa. Like,
mhm.
so what tips can we have to help us differentiate when we're communicating? Like, it's okay when we communicate because we're at the same, this is how we communicate. But in this area, if you're trying to negotiate and not offend or get clearer, what are some things we can do to help that gap become non-judgmental? Because
Mhm.
that's the first trigger that happens, or, oh, they're so stupid, or they're so slow, or they're so this. What can we do?
That's a great question. And my answer to that would be twofold. Number one, give them grace. Know that they are different, that they were raised differently from how we were raised. And there are almost more of them than there are of us. And as we get older, there are going to be new generations of talking faster, of only wanting to text, moving up on us. So we do need to give them grace and accept that they are who they are. The other thing that we need to do, and this is something to do no matter what, but it will help that generation communicate better with us. And that's where the concise, clear conversations come in, by making it short, by being factually accurate. So if there are facts, give them to me. Don't, um, don't, and if you make a habit of that, then you won't slip, because that goes back to a miscommunication. Well, I thought I told you that it was this. No, if you learn to communicate consistently with those points, the point example, point explanation example and stop, that you are transparent in what you say, you know what you've got, you talk clearly, and you don't want to waste anyone's time. That is a good practice to communicate with everybody. But it's an excellent practice when communicating with someone who's younger, because they don't want to hear the old person driveling along about stuff. And I believe that Vicky and Dee Dee, you were talking about your nephew who was
Mhm.
saying, All right already. Just get to the point. I'm sure that if I had been sitting there, I wouldn't have thought that you were talking too long. But you obviously weren't concise in what you're saying because it was a personal conversation. It wasn't a business conversation. But we need to learn to be more clear and concise in our communications because number one, it's effective and there are less misunderstandings. Everybody's busy and we just don't have the time we used to have. And with all the clutter and noise in our heads and people not listening as well as they used to, it needs to be a pattern of communication that we have as we are approaching tomorrow and next year and 2030. Yes, Dee Dee.
We're talking here about a communication system that's changing into a more masculine form of oriented communication. And really, feminine communication is more about connection. It is longer, it has more pauses, it has more questions and clarity that's needed. How is the best way in a quick masculine conversation to hold the feminine connection possibility?
That is a brilliant question, Dee Dee, because you're right. That's the difference between male and female. We want to connect. They want results. They want to say it and be done with it and then move on and not listen to all of our girl stuff. But I think that you can still be compassionate and build connection with your tone. I think that there are still questions. Men don't ask a lot of questions. Women ask questions. So by interjecting a question before you start speaking or after you start speaking to guide where the rest of the conversation goes, I think that those are things that will help support the feminine communication way without getting into the whole man stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Excellent.
As
Great.
I'm writing, but I realize it's going to be very hard to keep it short
Mhm.
and, as you said, tone. But that's most of the guys ignore tone. And
Exactly.
I mean, we're talking also about people distancing themselves. Only 20% of employees are communicating with each other. And when you're communicating in a style for disconnection, for results orientation, no wonder why we don't feel a connection to communicate. It's
Mhm.
kind of, you don't want to help someone that's a complete stranger. And you don't feel that emotional attachment. And if you're not connected, you don't want to assist, help, build, things like that.
No, that's an excellent observation.
Can
But
I
the
say something
important
real? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Monique.
I was going to say that I am one of two females in a household of nine. It's very masculine. I have a lot of very masculine conversations all the time, even with
Uh-huh.
different personalities. So what I've trained myself and my daughter to do is bring my voice down. If I
Mhm.
start to talk very softly, everybody has to shut up and listen because otherwise they're like, "What did you say?" And I only give you one chance to ask me, "What did I say?" Because you should have been listening. So I bring it down and I'm
Oh,
like, "Okay, so this is what we're gonna do." And you're like, "What is she saying?" And so if you're not talking and I'm talking, then you can hear me.
that is brilliant.
Yeah.
The wisdom. But you're right, it's a different communication style than we were raised with. But particularly when it's business, But sometimes, even when it's just personal conversation, we need to be more concise. And that is contrary to the feminine connection need. But you can accomplish it by being very present in the conversation, something that men usually are not. So if you're there, that's that's half of how you connect with people is being there. Yes, Vicky.
So I want to make sure that um, I explain this well. Somebody gave me some homework, and I wanted to say that I'm up for the challenge of saying, I want to make this explained well for me. So here's what I understand. I understand that the gap between the generations and how they speak is equally as important as the gap between the feminine and the masculine form of speaking. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I explain that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Homework completed.
The next thing I want to talk about is the global community. You see a lot of communications on my school and in my Substack articles about ESL speakers. And it is important as an English as a second language speaker to follow these same rules and add to that perhaps speak slightly slower, um, but have the intent to know what you're talking about before you start talking. And don't rush yourself, because if you rush yourself, your accent is going to become stronger and it's going to make it tougher for people to hear and or to not hear, to process. And that's the biggest problem with people, whether it is English as a second language accent, someone with a speech impediment, someone who's just not articulate at all. It is also significant for English speaking people who are working in the global community and are communicating to people whose first language is not English. So we think about English as a second language here, but you need to remember that when we're communicating with them, if we're doing it in English, that's not their first language necessarily. So we have the same responsibility that an English as a second language person has speaking English in America as we do speaking with everybody, because it's the same rules. Now, that's not to say that we all need to speak slower, unless number one, you're a really fast speaker, or number two, you're dealing with someone who is not from this country or not from this culture, that you communicate a little differently, that you're sensitive to their culture, you're sensitive to the language that you use when talking to someone who is not born in America, and doesn't have the same level of communication that you have. Um, it's like speaking to someone who has a hearing problem. You don't expect them to come to your level to listen. You change the way you speak slightly. You speak a little slower, maybe you speak a little louder, maybe you articulate a little bit more if someone has a hearing issue. It's the same thing if you are speaking to someone whose language or culture or communication style is different from yours. You need to go to, I don't want to make it sound like we're here versus here, because it's not, I'm not making a judgment on that. But you need to go to where they are. Yes, Vicky.
One thing I noticed from ESL speakers came from I worked a summer job at a 7-Eleven when I was in college. And this Japanese student came into the 7-Eleven and she asked me for a type of tape. And she said cassette tape. And I took her over there. There's electrician's tape, there's masking tape, there's scotch tape, there's all these tape. And she was like, no, no. And she kept saying the word over and over again. Well, when I was listening, I realized I wasn't quite listening. What happened for me is I kept saying the word over and over and over in my head because I was trying to figure out what I knew she was trying to say something. She said cassette tape. And I realized after saying it in my head that it was cassette tape. She wanted a cassette tape so that she could slide the cassette in there and practice her English in there. And I remember when I finally got the word, I was like, cassette. Cassette tape is what you want. So then you take her over to the cassette tape and you go, here's what you wanted. And I remember that day specifically because when she picked it up, she asked me to say the word again. I said cassette. And she practiced right then cassette, cassette, cassette. Now, my point is not that she was slowing down or we got the thing solved. What's happening to the receiver when you say it not quite as well, the person is trying to listen, but in the back of their mind, they're saying the word over and over again, trying to figure out what word you're actually trying to say so that they can be on the same page with you. And when you just said that, I was like, yeah, that's an important thing, that articulation. She did have to slow down to say cassette tape. Cassette. And the thing was, in her ESL, Japanese don't have, um, syllables in there that they strike. Everything is one word, cassette,
Mhm.
and we're cassette. So we have this enunciation, and I feel like part of the thing with the future of communicating is getting on here, saying it in Japanese, and then turning it over to me and going, now you say it. And I don't know if we lose our humanness in that or it helps us connect more, or whatever. But I know I think my way through the conversation. So I'm not really fully present with the listener when I'm trying to figure out what they're saying. And
That's
that's where I would like some grace.
exactly, and that's absolutely true because it goes back to whether it's because they're an ESL speaker or they have a speech impediment or they just speak differently. Nisha, no offense, but I've had some Southern Texan speakers that are a little hard to understand. You're not, but there are people in your fine state that can be difficult to understand. And don't even get me started on the Carolinas. That's oh, that's another one that's really hard. So it's not just English. It's communication overall. And when it's difficult for you to process, you're either spending so much time processing that you're not listening, or you give up. This is too hard to understand. And I'm so impressed that you got cassette out of that because I didn't until you said it. I was lost on that. Dee Dee, one last thought before I wrap up?
I I wanted to bring up the point that, I had once a bunch of English speakers from England, and they could not understand anybody because of the speed at which many of the Americans were talking. And I was actually translating English into English because
Mhm.
speed and the diction. And it's very
Exactly.
interesting that this doesn't apply just to ESL as foreign languages. It actually applies to dialects of our own language as well, as you pointed out with Texas
Yes,
slur.
and you're right. I hadn't thought about that. We think, so many people say, "Oh, the Spanish people talk so fast." Well, they do, but you know what? English speakers talk really fast too. It's
Cajun, Louisiana, Cajun speakers, it's like they have water in their mouth and you're like, you don't know what they're saying.
It's tough. So it's important to understand that the things that I communicate to ESL speakers are really applicable for all of us because we're all different in one way or another. I know it's just past the hour, but I just want to wrap up here in just a few minutes. Um, it doesn't matter what the future holds. It doesn't matter how much AI takes over, how much Gen Z gets involved in the workforce. What matters is that human communication is still going to be part of every meeting, every Zoom call, every job interview, every intimate conversation with your partner. It's all human communication. And we can either choose to go with the flow and be like everybody else who stops articulating, who stops thinking clearly, who stops focusing on what's fast and easy as opposed to what's right. So if you stay focused on clear communication, concise communication, being present in your communication, it will serve you all better in the long run, both today and in 2030. I thank you for your time. I'm sorry I went 4 minutes over, but I appreciate you as always. Thank you to each of you for being here. And you brought up some excellent points, Monique. I love the idea of speaking quieter around the men to get their attention. That's a wonderful tip. And Dee Dee, I'm particularly impressed with that assessment of male versus female communication. That I hadn't thought about that, and that is strong. That was a really good one. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye.